Hi, it's Jeff Chalmers here from discoverdoublebase.com. If you haven't already seen the website, please go and check it out after this video and you'll find a ton of free bass lessons. Okay, today I'm going to be showing you the quickest, the easiest, the most painless way to change the strings on your double bass. To get started, I recommend laying the bass flat on its back, and a great place to do this is just to lay the bass on a bed. Now with the edge of the bed around here, you've got space to the side that you can easily access the peg box and you can tighten and loosen the strings as needed. And you'll also find that the body of the bass is really well supported. You can do this by laying the bass on the floor, again flat on its back, but be very careful that the weight of the instrument isn't being supported by the scroll. With mine, my scroll comes back so far it would actually take up the weight of the instrument, so I'd need to put a pillow or something slightly under this side of the instrument to raise it up a little. Well, it's also possible to lay the bass down on its side and change the strings in that position as well. Again, I'm not a fan for a couple of reasons. One, because it's quite hard to get down on your knees and access the peg box comfortably. But also, I prefer to have the instrument flat on its back so the sound post is facing upwards all the time. The sound post is a wooden rod which is placed in between the back and the front of the double bass on the inside. So the tension of the strings goes down and keeps the sound post in position. And what we don't want to do is release all the tension and then find that the sound post falls down and you'll have a bit of a pain digging around in the bass trying to reset that. Another thing to look out for is that, especially if you're starting out doing this for the first time, you may accidentally knock the bridge out of position. A little tip I have for you is to use a soft pencil and just gently outline on the top. Don't mark your bass in terms of the varnish, just put a very soft, gentle layer of pencil around the bridge feet, and that will help you reposition them in the event of accidentally knocking it slightly out of alignment. Another thing that will help keep your bass in good shape is to think about the input jack on a pickup if you have one. And I recommend using an old towel or something and just unhooking this before you get started and laying that on top. I'd recommend, if this is the first time that you've changed the strings on your bass, just take a quick photo, maybe with your phone or something, of the way the strings are laid out in the peg box, just in case you have any problems later. But let's have a quick look at this now. But what we're trying to do is end up so the strings aren't rubbing against the side of the peg box. You can see there's a bit of room here. This one's pretty tight there, perhaps a little tighter than I'd like. But as you can see, this string has to cross this one at this point. And ideally, we don't want the strings crossing and rubbing against each other. But with my old bass, it's always going to be a little bit of a compromise. Another thing I'd recommend is to buy a string winder. They're not expensive, they're only a few pounds, and it'll make the whole process a lot easier. So what we're going to do is we're going to start on the G string side. Now, you could start on the E and work across that way. I actually personally don't think it really matters. I've heard people make different suggestions, different orders, but frankly, as long as we try to keep the tension on the bridge by not removing all of the strings, we'll probably be okay, particularly with the bass flat on its back. So that's the first point. Never remove all of the strings from the bass. We're going to try and do it one by one. However, with some smaller peg boxes like mine, you'll actually have to loosen off a second string as well. So let's have a look how that's going to work. So I'm starting with the G, and I'm just going to loosen that off. So the string's quite loose now, but as we can see, I can't access this very easily because of the position of the D string. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen it off a touch. There we are. And it'll enable me just to pull the string. There we are. Oh, a little bit more. Pull the string across just to give me a little bit of access to the G. Now, ideally, if you can access the peg box without loosening the D, I would recommend doing that. But as I say, if you have to slightly slacken it off like I've done here, I don't think that's too much of a big deal. So I've just loosened off the string in the peg box, managed to thread it through the peg. And what I recommend is pulling the string out from this side of the tailpiece rather than feeding it through underneath, which you can damage the string and it's a lot harder to do. Now, just before we put the new string on, I actually wanted to recommend that you give your fingerboard a bit of a wipe down just to get rid of any gunk that's accumulated since you changed the strings last time. Now, the other thing that's really worth doing as well is using pencil lead to lubricate the bridge and the nut. And this is the point that the string travels across, and it just makes the whole thing a bit smoother for the string. So let's have a look here. I'll just add a little bit of pencil in the slot there, and I'll do it in the D as well since I've got that to one side. Well, now I've got the string, I'm going to put a new set of D'Addario Zyx on my bass and give those a try. And if we just take this out of the packet here, it comes with a little felt washer. And they were also on my old strings as well. And I recommend using those if you have them provided, but if not, it'll be fine without one. So I usually just thread that down from the top and it should end up down at the other end of the string. And I also recommend putting the string on again through the top of the tailpiece if possible, rather than stringing it from underneath. Okay, so now we have the string at the peg box end. We're going to pop it through the hole there, wrap it around itself, probably about a third of the coloured wrap that's at the end of the string. And let's have a look at that. Now what I'm going to do is wrap that round, put it out of the way, hold on to it at the end, and I'm just going to tighten the string with my string winder. Now what I'm trying to do is to make sure that I direct the string, in this case, to my right, and in that way it won't be bundling up on the wrong side and won't be coming into contact with any of the strings. Okay, at this point in the process you can see I'm halfway through. I've done the G and the D, and I'm going to have to do the same thing with the E and the A, because as you can see I can't access my E string without releasing the A and pulling it to one side. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Release the A string and then change the E. So let's have a quick look in the peg box, and you can see that I've switched over the strings here and I've managed to get them fairly neat. There's a bit of touching there between the strings, and there's a little bit of room between the side, that string, and the side of the peg box. As I say, my bass is a little bit tricky and you might not be able to get it perfect, but try and avoid crossing them over and keep it as neat as you can. I've got a couple of quick tips just to finish off. As you're winding the string, you may find that the bridge is pulled in this direction, so you may have to pull it back ever so slightly, especially as the strings are looser, just to make sure that you're not pulling it out of alignment. Lastly, make sure that you never use wire cutters to trim the ends of the strings. Persevere with this method. I know it's fiddly, but of lining up the strings correctly in the peg box, and your strings will last a lot longer. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the lesson today. It's been a bit different for me, wrestling with the bass on this workbench, and of course there hasn't been any playing. If it has helped you, please let me know by clicking that like button on YouTube, and it'll help me reach new people. And of course you know where to go if you want more free video double bass lessons. Please visit discoverdouble bass.com.